Peace worldwide starts from inside. And while it is obvious to us through our political divide and the divides in the world, it's easier to see them in other people. I'm a mechanical and biomedical engineer. That was my first career. I went to Motorola. I went on to internal medical school, like every good Indian child does, and became an internal medicine physician. When I burned out, I realized the connection between our physical health and unhealed mental, emotional, social, and spiritual wounds. And I went into executive coaching. I became faculty for mind-body medicine, learned about mindfulness. I went really deep in understanding human psychology and the ways in which we deal with trauma and life and death. So I sit at the intersection of disciplines people don't even know go together.
So today I have a woman who has been trained as a traditional medical doctor that has journeyed to a different path while taking that information, tweaking it, if you will, and going into the space of being the CEO and founder of Intuitive Intelligence. She's also an internal medicine physician. She's an international speaker and a corporate communication expert. So all my listeners will know how much synergy I have with this woman. So allow me to introduce you to Dr. Neha Sangwan. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I'm so excited to be with you.
Thank you. So, Neha, you started out as a medical doctor, right? Traditional path. How did you go from being a traditional, I guess you were an internist, or you are an
Internal
internist?
medicine, yeah. Internal medicine hospitalist.
Which for most people would, if you're not familiar, that's like a general practitioner. And to doing executive coaching and wellness. And first of all, like, how much of your work is medicine and how much of your work is everything else?
So I'm going to take you back a little bit. I will tell you that growing up, I'm the middle daughter of three.
Three girls? Not three girls.
Three girls in an immigrant family.
Boy.
And
Okay.
grew up in the middle of Michigan.
From India.
From India. And
Okay.
my parents had an arranged marriage. I grew up in the middle of Michigan. And I had an experience where my parents sent me to be with my grandparents for the first couple years of my life, from 3 months to 2 years old. And
that was in India. That was in
no,
India?
they were my grandfather worked for the United Nations, and so he was stationed in Africa. And so I went there with my grandmother for the first few years of my life. So when I returned, it was really hard for me. I don't think my parents realized. Of course, I was with great care, and your grandparents take even probably better care of you than your parents because your parents are in the throes of their work and
life.
All of that.
Yeah.
So I was really bonded to them. So when I came back, my older sister was 3.5 and I was 2. She wasn't really interested in having somebody sharing her parents' love. And I really wasn't interested in leaving my grandparents. So it kind of led to kind of a rough reintroduction of our family. And
Neha, I have to ask you, why did your parents what was the impetus for them sending you away at such a young age?
So my parents were both immigrants working full time, and they had my older sister who was 18 months, and my grandmother had come to live with us because she was taking care of Ritu while my mom was working, etc. I think I was kind of a surprise, like they didn't expect the second one, and they're both working full time, and now you've got a second one on the way, and so now you have a newborn and an 18-month-old. And your husband gets stationed with the UN in Africa. And my grandfather says to my grandmother, I know how to do the work in agriculture and helping them here, but there's a whole societal, social element of the UN that you're really good at. I need you to come here so you can take care of the social piece while I take care of my job. I think my parents, so multiple things. One is that they're like, oh my God, now we've got two kids, no help. We're trying to make it all work, right? How are we going to get creative? So that's kind of the entrepreneurial nature, I think, of immigrants. But the second piece was my mom's uh, my mom's younger brother died in a car crash 2 years earlier. So my grandparents were quite devastated at the loss of their son.
Sure.
My mom's intention in all of this was, first of all, culturally, you just pass kids around an extended family. That's what you do in India. And so
Right.
they
Right.
didn't really think anything of it. And then the second piece was my mom hoped that I would bring that life to them
Joy.
and that
Yeah.
focus and that joy because they were so heartbroken. So I
Mhm.
think it served my parents. I think it served my grandparents getting excited, that they're going to have this little being. And I think part of it was about their healing, you know?
Yeah.
And so, hey, listen, there's benefits to your grandparents raising you. I mean, I was their favorite their whole life. They never stopped saying it. Now, for any parents or grandparents listening, I do not think that's helpful to your relationship with your
With
siblings.
your siblings.
Like that's not
Right.
helpful.
Right.
So I wouldn't recommend it, but listen, there were benefits to it all. So I was always close to my grandparents.
Mhm.
And so when I came back, I really struggled in
So, and
leaving.
why did you come? Why was it time for you to come back? I'm sure there's a story behind that.
Well, it's just they were there for an assignment, right? So
Oh, the assignment was over. Okay.
yeah, and it was time. Like my mom was like, "Okay, Neha's 2 years old. Like we can do this now. Like we're gonna." So my mom, my older sister, who was 3.5, came to pick me up, and I really cried bloody murder for like a month. And they didn't know what to do with me, but I also didn't know what to do as a child to express that kind of separation, grief, loss. Like I didn't understand what was happening.
Mhm.
So when I came home to Michigan and now realize that no matter how much I cried, I wasn't going back.
Mhm.
I disconnected from my body because it felt too painful. And I connected to the outside world and became a master of picking up what other people wanted from me. So I realized maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe that's why I was being punished, right? Of course, none of that was true.
So a little bit of a disassociation. They say that happens in children of alcoholic
Sure.
parents. They disconnect from what they're feeling, and they're very
Yeah.
tuned into the people around them.
Well, what you might even say is that when I look at this from a trauma standpoint, two times under 2 years old, by 2 years old, I had been once separated from my mother, from the smells, the sounds of everything that was secure to me when I was birthed. Although my grandmother has been there since the day I was born, that transition still was a separation from mother. And
Mhm.
then the second separation was from who I thought were my parents, now to my real parents, right? So I had two of those under 2 years old, which is pretty traumatic for a kid. And of course, my family didn't think of that. They didn't have any real awareness of that. They just thought they were kind of making everything work, right? And they knew I was in safe hands. So I come back, I'm having a hard time readjusting. Well, my 3.5-year-old sister's like, who's this pain in the neck? Like, she can't stop crying. She's a baby. Like, get her to pay attention. But I wasn't like a limp, floppy baby that would do anything she wanted me to do. I was a 2-year-old who thought I was an only child.
Mhm.
She was a
Mhm.
3.5-year-old who thought she was an only child. And I think our family didn't anticipate that clash. So
Mhm.
I turned into a people pleaser. What can I do to make everyone happy here so no one sends me away? And she started bullying me because she kind of didn't want me there. I
Mhm.
don't think
Mhm.
she knew, what she was doing consciously, but I think she felt threatened. Like, what child wants to now share your parental love with someone else, right?
So I'll tell you a very funny story. I think it was Anna Freud because she was the one Sigmund's daughter who studied child development. She was one of the first, and I think she discovered. I think it was called the Hampstead Clinic in London, and it was really the first time we studied child development. And she was asked, "What's a good time to have another child? Like when you have one child, what's a good age?" And her response was this: it's like going home and telling your wife, I love you so much, I'm going to have another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's what you experienced. Yeah.
Yeah. And we unpacked it many years later, because then I'm getting bullied and I'm becoming a more and more of a people pleaser, thinking maybe I did something wrong to cause all this pain in myself. And then I'm now trying to adapt and be a good girl. So I figure out pretty quickly that my parents, my grandparents, and the Indian community really value athletics and academics. By
I never heard about the athletics for the girls. I heard the academics.
Oh yeah,
Athletics
like
as well.
tennis. And tennis is a big,
Oh,
yeah.
cricket.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Were
Yeah.
were your parents Brahmin?
No, we are the warrior caste, right
Okay.
after Brahmin. My
Okay. So
dad
it's still
were
up there.
Jots. So
Yeah.
that's another thing I gotta say. The fact that, there's discrimination from different skin colors and different races and different cultures. Something I've always been fascinated by, and not in a great way, is the caste system in India. And that a group of people would somehow say that by birth you are worthy
Mm.
or not worthy, or more worthy or less worthy, or this color of your skin would determine your worthiness, has never really sat well with me, um, from a culture that comes from such a depth of yoga
Mm.
and of wisdom and of
Interesting.
timelessness. I think what it points to is what I call life school and our life lessons, that we have to illuminate the paradoxes of the truth, right? So it's like, can India be the home of ancient wisdom that, gives
Mm.
us things like yoga and the mind body connection? And yes, Ayurveda, all of these things. And can India discriminate against itself? Yes. And both of those things
So Nate,
are
to your point, that's so interesting. I never looked at it that way. Years ago, I read a book, Shantarama. Have you read it?
No, I haven't, but I've heard of
It's a
it. Yeah.
fabulous book. It talks about every issue of life, through
Mm,
the lens of India and the caste and the British and the
yeah.
wind, the rains, the floods. But as an American and Americans in general, I truly believe, and I guess we could argue this, I truly believe Americans don't really understand that we have the freedom regardless. If you have the brain power, if you have the education in America, nobody, like, I've always felt self conscious having a Brooklyn accent when I got old enough to know I had it, right? Because for years I didn't know I had it. Never stopped me
Mhm.
unless I allowed it to stop me, right? And people think England is so similar to America because it's English. I'm like, no. In England, if you don't have the private boarding school accent, they know. And then in India, it's probably the extreme. So I don't think Americans truly understand the depth of what you're saying because we haven't experienced it. If anything, our founding fathers built this country upon the polar opposite of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think every society has ways in which they try to belong. And the
Mm-hmm.
way that belonging happens is we try to figure out the ways that people are like us and the things that
Mm-hmm.
make them different. What I can tell you as a doctor is it doesn't matter who you are. When I cut you open, your organs look the same, your blood is the same, everything is the same. After a few millimeters of skin, it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the funniest part of life is we have to go through all these ways that we think we're separate. And sometimes it looks like skin color, and sometimes it looks like politics, and sometimes it looks like religion, and sometimes it looks like where you came from, your family came from. It doesn't matter what those are. Those are all ways that people try to feel safe in belonging, that you're like me and other people aren't. And what I've learned as a doctor is we're all actually the same. When you're on my gurney, when we're cutting you open, none of that matters. It's a
Mm-hmm.
human is a human is a human. And I think the like funniest thing about it all is it's almost like the universe has a very interesting sense of humor. Like we all have to
Mm-hmm.
struggle so that we can figure out like what is so clearly there, right?
The
So
obvious. I do have to say, Neha, though, I do have to say two things. So, one in support of what you're saying is when you travel the world
mhm,
and you look at a playground, all
yep,
kids are the same. The dynamic is the
they are.
same. And I know I was in Saudi Arabia right before women were given the right to drive. And then I went on national TV and I spoke about it. And I said, you really see how we are so much more alike than we are different. Now, I'm in Saudi Arabia where you have women covered from head to toe, and women dressed like Westerners. And you have me, the quintessential, not only quintessential American, but the quintessential New Yorker. You couldn't be more different.
Yeah,
Yet, really, we're very much alike.
totally.
But I will say, I think people very benignly, like look for people similar to themselves, right? It's almost an innate tribal thing because, to your point, there we're safe. We feel safe in that regard. But I think it's present and it speaks to our brain, but it's also a primitive
Mhm.
way of being, right? So we have evolved to where we can all be friends because we're all alike. So I just wanted to comment on that. Like I
Sure.
understand the seeking, same attract same kind of thing.
Yeah. And what I'd say, so in 2008, I was asked to speak in Saudi Arabia. And at the time, I was a 38-year-old single Hindu Indian woman.
Yeah.
And a white male over 70 asked me to take his place at the conference. And I come from a family. I think it's more even than people are like us or not like us. It's about the blueprint of our childhood. It's about the things that shaped us. It's about our culture and what we were raised valuing and believing and
Mm-hmm.
what we're afraid of. And
Mm-hmm.
so my parents were raised when in the big Hindu Muslim divide and the independence of
Mm-hmm.
India. So when this opportunity came, they said, "No way, my daughter is not going to go to a Muslim country and help them in any way." So all their unhealed wounds came up. Now, the way that I view this is, yeah, we can play it safe and we can be with people who are safe and like us, as long as we don't want to grow and learn, as long as
Mm-hmm.
what we want to do is stay in our comfort zone. And if everybody wants to stay in their comfort zone, it's fine. Except let me tell you what happens when you stay in your comfort zone too long: boredom, affairs, all sorts of things start happening when people sit in their comfort zone too long and don't have growth and their own like growth and awareness. So when you get out of the comfort zone, I like to go into what I call, some people call it the uncomfortable zone, but I call it the learning zone. And in the learning zone, my heart might race a little bit, my stomach might turn, but you know what? I'm alive. I feel
Mm-hmm.
alive. I'm learning something new. I'm getting a new perspective. I'm expanding. I'm growing and I feel alive. If I go too far, now I'm going to hit the panic zone. And
Mm-hmm.
the panic zone is telling me that this has exceeded my physiology, my own ability, my own body's capacity to handle newness, whatever the new uh, situation is. I'm out of my depth and I'm not resourceful when I hit the panic zone. So for a moment, Saudi Arabia was the panic zone for me, which was my family's like, "You're not going." I'm like, "Oh, what is this? Am I going to be treated differently because I'm a woman? They didn't invite me. They invited you." My mentor is saying, "I want you to represent my work in Saudi. You're the perfect person to do it." In the end, after I worked through the panic zone and got to the learning zone, I went there and fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the culture. And dare I say that they treated me spectacularly.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of my time there, I spent 7 days. I lived in their homes. I mingled with the women. I was with the men. I went falcon hunting with the prince. I did all of these things. And in the end, we're sitting on the rug after we've done falcon hunting, me and 40 men. And the prince sits down and I'm giving him a signed copy of Jim Gordon's book that I was supposed to deliver. And he says, "Neha, Neha, sit down. Sit down. I'd like to talk to you. On this rug, it's like you all around a campfire. We are out in the desert. We have Arabian tea and dates, and, the falcon hunting is our sport. I'd like you to tell me, what is it about that the media has taught you about our culture that you find to be true? And what is it that the media has taught you about our culture that you find not to be true? And it was like that moment where I took a deep breath in and I'm like, how honest am I going to be here?
Mhm.
And I think we all do that a lot. And I don't think anyone's going to argue that the quality of our lives has a parallel to the quality of our relationships. And what I
Mhm.
learned in this moment was that there was literally like an elevator floor that I was trying to figure out, on what level do I get off and answer this question? And then I took a deep breath and I thought, well, he told me we're on the rug where anything goes. He's asking me the question. The real question is, do I trust myself to give a deeper, clearer, authentic answer? And so the answer was yes. So I said to him, listen, what the media has taught me in the 7 days I've been here is that there is a divide between men and women, clearly in society and at the conference. At the conference, I spoke in front of hundreds of men, and women watched me on video in the same hotel from another wing.
Yeah, see, I spoke to the first mixed gender audience on
Yeah.
business leadership in Saudi. That was a couple of years after you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So 2 years later, when I walked into the
fascinating.
room, 2 years later, when I walked into that same room, there was a divide. I could
Hmm.
see the women over here and the men over here, but they couldn't see each other. And then Al
Yes.
Jazeera was filming me up front. So yes, they progressed even in those 2 years. And
Hmm.
then I said, but what's not true is that I was told you would treat me like a second-class citizen because I was a woman. And I was surprised. You didn't do that, but you have treated me with the utmost of respect, and you've included me even here today. And so he said to me, well, he just smiled. And I said to him, well, if this is the anything goes rug, it's my turn. I get to ask you a question. Tell me why I'm a 38-year-old single Indian woman. I don't cover myself from head to toe. I've been with men that I didn't marry. Why is it that you treat me with such respect and honor? And then he smiled and he said, well, I cheated. I said, what do you mean? He said, when we heard you were coming over, we were worried about what your intentions would be for our women, for our community, and what influence you would have on them. But when I got word that when you stepped off the plane, you had your head covered in a black scarf, in that moment, what I knew was it was not my job to make you part of our culture. It was my job to honor the culture from which you come. And I have to tell you, that changed me. It changed me that two human beings that come from traumatic backgrounds that wasn't even mine, it was my parents' trauma, that could come together and could show one another respect, that could meet one another in a place of generous intent and spirit and change our own beliefs. We together could create a new future together. And 2 years later, they created my own spot at that conference, not speaking in place of someone else. And from then on, one speaking spot has been saved for a woman. So,
It's interesting. It's interesting because when I knew I was going to go there, and this was right before women were given the right to drive. So it was a whole hubbub going on. And it's really, they're such hospitable people. It's amazing, right?
yeah.
But it was made very clear to me, and rightfully so, that I am there to modernize them, not westernize them, right? So I also covered myself and dressed appropriately. And, my sense is when in Rome, do as the Romans. And I found that they absolutely love American women. They love us. They just don't want their women to be us. And the women do not want to be us because they find it overwhelming. There's too many choices. Like when the women I spoke to, when they had the right to drive, I said, are you excited? She goes, not really. And I'm like, really? Because they're like addicted to their phones like the rest of us. She goes, yeah, I just assumed be in the back of my car texting. And no judgment, right? So it's very interesting. And I do, all right, we'll go here for a minute. And I think if women ran the world in these countries, I think there would be more of the coming together, right? Because we don't have a male ego to protect. But that's a whole other conversation. And I feel like society in general has ebbed and flowed with men and women being equal. Even medicine, medicine law. I believe, I don't have the numbers. I'm not a number person, but I believe that there's more women going into both medical school and law school than there are men.
Yep.
However, men and women take different paths when they graduate. So the professions are still controlled, if you will. It's still a male-dominated profession.
Yep.
Even though there's more women in it, because we have different we make different choices.
Yeah.
So
definitely. I think there's something really important about how we've separated out genders, in the sense that I think each one of us has masculine qualities and feminine qualities within us.
Of
And
course.
I, as a little girl, learned to achieve in academics and athletics. And I've developed the doer, aggressive, like my go out, support myself, be independent woman. I also, in my relationship, noticed that I wasn't allowing my partner to care for me. I said, I can do this on my own. And there's a way that I showed up almost imbalanced in a way that society valued what they'll pay for, what they'll revere, what they'll, say is going to, get things done, is the masculine side of me. And so the last 10 years, I've actually paid attention to relaxing into the joy of being more feminine. And in that space, what I think leadership often in our society is about next quarter's earnings. It's about the numbers. It's about how much can you get done. And I think what's lacking is the other wing of the bird, which is, let's care about each other while we do it. Let's have a higher purpose that matters and changes society in a way that betters the world. How do we do well, make a profit while doing good? Like, can we break these ideas that it's one or the other? Can we figure out how the and is even better? And I think that in order to succeed as a leader in any country, having both of those qualities developed in you, being a man who can get things done and cares deeply for your staff, for the purpose of what you're doing, who makes decisions, treating people as if they're someone they care about versus a number to be minimized or taken away. I think humanity needs both in order to be at its highest function. I think as a physician, I need to get things done. I need to react quickly, make decisions, keep moving, and I need to care. And who are the most amazing physicians? Well, they're the ones who have bedside manner.
Right. They're the ones that don't get sued either, even if they're...
Well, no, they don't. I was asked that when I left my practice and moved into entrepreneurship. They literally called me in to say, can you please tell us why in such high-risk environments you were never named in a lawsuit, you were never sued? And I said to the risk management group, number one, I never listened to all the rules you gave me. Number two, I admitted when I made a mistake. Number three, when I walked in with a patient in the hospital, I gave them and their family my cell phone number. In 8 years, 2 of them used that cell phone number, and I'm so glad they did. When you build trust with people, when they know you care about them, when they feel your sincerity, they don't sue you. Like, and then I said at the end of that meeting, and by the way, guys, I'd change the name of your department from risk management to love management because I'm not fueled by fear. I'm fueled by love. And it helps me make my decisions. And that would save you a lot of money.
So there's so much truth to what you're saying, and it's so simple, common sense. But common sense is the least common of senses, and medicine is becoming more and more dehumanized, right? And that's a whole other conversation. But tell me a little. I like to segue just a little bit into. Tell me a little bit about, as someone with the work that you do with, mental health and, corporate and burnout. And I work with corporate and entrepreneurs, and it is insane. Like the whole corporate quarterly earnings is such a broken system. It is disgusting to me, quite honestly, that we don't meet our numbers. So let's just lay off. Like,
Mhm.
I am a diehard capitalist, but some of these executives are getting paid way too much. How about you lose your job? But
Mhm.
but and then it's not done with any empathy now. Like it's on a Zoom call or an email, or it really upsets me. But I think it's reflective of the where and I'm wondering how you do work with this with patients, with your clients and your coaching clients, because even when they're working, right, you do bring your whole self to work, right? I mean, I know that's overused, but it's true. I mean, I'm coaching an executive. I get into their personal life. I'm coaching someone personally. I'm getting into their work because you cannot. What is the expression? The body has no bounds, has no boundaries, right?
Mhm.
But how do you address the toxicity, the toxic environment
Mhm.
that we are living in today? But so you have toxicity in our food, we have toxicity in our environment, we have toxicity in our workplace. Lord knows we have toxicity in the media. You turn on CNN, you know what you're getting. You turn on Fox, you know what you're getting, and it's like there's no sense of we are in this together. And people they're getting sick from it, literally sick from it, and relationships are suffering.
Mhm.
So how's that for a small nut to crack? Take it anywhere you want to go.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with peace worldwide starts from inside.
Mm-hmm.
And while it is obvious to us that through our political divide and the divides in the world, it's easier to see them in other people and harder to recognize them in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a mirror that goes on whenever. So I'm a mechanical and biomedical engineer. That was my first career. I went to Motorola when in the 90s when Motorola was a thing. I went on to internal medical school, like every good Indian child does, and became an internal medicine physician. When I burned out, I realized the connection between our physical health and unhealed mental, emotional, social, and spiritual wounds. And I went into executive coaching. I became faculty for mind body medicine, learned about mindfulness. I went really deep in understanding human psychology and the ways in which we deal with trauma and life and death. So I sit at the intersection of disciplines people don't even know go together. The engineer in me makes everything quite practical. The doctor in me understands when something physical has a physical cause. The executive coach and mindfulness part of me understands when something physical shows up as a way to let you know that something is being ignored or unhealed on a mental, emotional, social, and spiritual level and showing up in your physical body to get your attention. So, what I will say is the divisions we see in the world, whenever I come to solving difficult problems, so I have two books. One's on leaning into healthy conflict, Talk RX. The second one is Powered by Me on burnout, from burned out to fully charged at work and in life. So, I take healing conflict, burnout, global overwhelm, and my job is to demystify them, personalize them for people, and then give powerful, practical tools to heal. So
Okay,
when
so stop right there. So give an example. Give an example of how you help someone that's burnt out, because every I, I don't know anyone that doesn't feel burnt out.
Yeah. Well, so the way I think about it, so the book is called Powered by Me. from burned out to fully charged at work and in life. So how I figure out whether someone, where they are on the spectrum, because we're all on the spectrum, from burned out to fully charged, is by figuring out whether you have a net gain or a net drain of energy on a physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual level. Once you figure that out, and you got to answer some questions. I'm happy to give that link to the assessment for anyone listening that might want to do it for themselves. That once you figure it out, it's not just the questions I have you answer, it's also paying attention to your body and whether your body, as you're answering these questions, is constricted, tight, knotted, heavy, or that's
Expanded.
net drain, or open, relaxed, and light. Because sometimes your body's like, 4 hours of sleep is enough. I don't have time. I'll sleep when I'm dead. But your body is heavy, exhausted, and saying, I'm not in alignment with that. So when I come to solving big problems like this, I see it as me, we, world. And I think we have to expand our perspective. So this divide that we're talking about across the world, it starts within us. It starts within us when we do things like think we have to, for me, what I was going to tell you, but way back when we were talking about my growing up, I overheard my dad when I was young. So I'm a people pleaser, right? You know, the trauma that happened early in my life. I feel like abandonment and me, losing people is like my big trauma. So I overhear, I'm 6 or 7 years old, and I hear my dad talking to one of his friends in the office. I'm walking by and he says, yeah, and the second one even was a girl. All I wanted was a son who could be an engineer, just like me. My little brain, the people-pleasing brain, starts, can't do the son thing, but wow, I could be an engineer. I'm good at math and science. I start really focusing on math and science. Then I overhear my
Are you
mom.
consciously aware of that?
Nope.
Okay.
No
Okay.
conscious aware. I now know.
Right.
What happened. I tried to be a boy. I started playing tennis. I started being very masculine. Like I was like, oh, I can do that. We can build engines together. I can. So I started taking on this whole thing without even knowing it. Then I heard my mom, and she was talking about how her parents didn't let her go become a surgeon because they got her married and said, what kind of a wife and a mother will you be if you're always on call or always in the hospital? We need you to be the family unit is what's most important. So her dream was unfulfilled dream of becoming a surgeon. So she's like, gosh, I really hope one of you girls becomes a doctor because my parents didn't let me. My little brain was like, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I'll go to engineering school. I'll become a mechanical and biomedical engineer. I'll then go to med school. Everybody can stop fighting. That's how much I didn't want anyone to fight. I wanted harmony.
Mm.
When you realize how the blueprint of your life shapes you, I'm a middle child. That's a keeping the peace child. I was sent away. I'm trying to make sure none of that trauma happens again. As you start to understand, it wasn't until, and my sister and I, now we've talked about it, but in our 30s is when I separated from needing her approval, her, stopping behaving in ways that weren't okay for me, where I developed my own personal power and realized that my throat constriction, fatigue, all the things burning out, all of this was at its core on the me level, me, we world. Me level was me disconnecting from my own body, not taking care of it, making other people more important than me, suppressing my emotions, not speaking up, and taking on everyone else's unmet dreams, unfulfilled, everything upon myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was literally making me sick. And so there's a huge connection when we divide within us. We then go out in the world and we are divided. But the divide we see is, oh, this versus that. This, we see it externally easier than we can understand it within ourselves, because within me, it's the invisible divisions. Outside me, it's this side of the table, that side of the table, right? It's much more visible. And then in the world, we can see things because, natural disasters and all sorts of things that are happening are visible. Now, There's economists and people who will teach you about trends in the world. That's a little more invisible, but they're speaking about trends. So what I'd say to you is this divide that we're experiencing in the world, start by asking yourself something really simple. Like, when does my body and my mind separate themselves? It's as simple as me laying in bed, needing to go to the bathroom, and my mind saying to my body, not now. Do you know how many times I've done that? I mean, now what I say to my body after burning out and writing this book and launching it and healing, I'm not fully healed. Every day I have to make choices to remind myself that I'm connected and united and aligned in this body. My body only has to ask once. If it's hungry, if it needs to go to the bathroom, if it's exhausted and I need to stop. I made a deal that my mind doesn't get to be the CEO and chairman of the boardroom of Neha Inc. It has to partner with my body and my heart. And the three of them together are going to be a much more powerful force in the world. Really, the four of them, because I say my spirit, like my soul. What is the purpose? Why am I here? What impact do I want to make in the world? What do I value? So those parts of me need to be in alignment. And I don't need to be pleasing other people. I need to know who I am, and I need to be compassionate with other people. I need to be connected to other people. And I want to also be with people who think differently than I do, because they expand me out of my comfort zone if I get curious, not furious. And so this divide is a much bigger question than how do we really just, say, how are we going to heal this? Because I am really of the belief that peace worldwide starts from inside. I think it's how you and I both went to Saudi and could find the beauty in something so different than us. I think that we want to see women leaders in the world, like you mentioned. And I also think that women themselves need to first develop their own personal power so they don't just say they want to be leaders, but they can show up with both their masculine and feminine side and be those leaders. Mm-hmm. That's our job. Not get caught in trying to belong and giving up who we are. No, sometimes you do have to make hard decisions. But I don't believe that next quarter's numbers need to be made by cutting headcount. That is not the only option. That's actually a simple and kind of not very thoughtful answer.
Yeah. It's almost impulsive.
Yeah, it is. And it's people try to make the visible, short, direct answers.
It's the easy.
We live in a complex world, and it's getting more and more complex now. AI is a major factor. All things are exponentially moving faster and getting more complex. And so,
okay, so Neha, I was going to go somewhere else, but you brought that up. So
sure.
So as we're having this interview, this morning, Elon Musk is suing Sam Altman for OpenAI. And I had just read his bio, so I understand his passion. I believe he feels betrayed by Sam Altman. There's, Elon Musk, like everybody, has his issues, but he truly believes he's trying to save humanity. A lot of what he's doing is for humanity. He truly believes that. You can agree or disagree with how he goes about it. But to your point about AI, where do you see AI's future in our work as coaches, as people wanting to heal people? I will say make people whole, to be able to accept who they are and their limitations and who other people are and their limitations. Because it feels like, certainly after October 7th, it feels like the world is just becoming more and more fractured. Do you think AI will play a role? And I know we don't know, so I really do want to know what you think. Do you think, of course, it can play a role for positive or negative, but where do you think AI comes in this discussion? Because from what I understand, it will be the game changer that it was when we moved from the farms to the Industrial Revolution, like that much of a paradigm shift.
Yeah, yeah. I do think it will be that much of a paradigm shift. And I think it's as big of a change as when we got computers and when we combined cell phones with the internet. And now we're at AI. And so I think there is a progression. If we take a step back, somewhere along the way, we have decided as a collective world that faster is better and that we need to do more with less, and that profit over people and all sorts of beliefs that are going on. What I think,
and more is more.
and more
And
is
more
more.
is more.
Yeah. And so we've taken our minds, our collective minds, and we have co-created an external world that is currently moving faster than our biology can handle
Mm-hmm.
because we have those beliefs. Now,
Mm-hmm.
in order to live in a world where that is happening, we need to shut down the physiology, the heart racing, the stomach turning, the signals coming from our body, heart, and spirit saying, whoa, 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 I actually do need to sleep. I actually do need rest. I actually do need to slow. Like, Mother Nature has created the most sophisticated machine in us.
Mm.
And in that, 1/3 of our time is meant to spend sleeping, to do internal processing,
Healing. Yeah.
heal, repair of our immune system, memory consolidation, emotional processing. We have an inner to-do list that goes on. And so Mother Nature has shown us that there is exertion and rest, and there's the beauty in cycles and routine. But we as a collective humanity have decided that more money is better, faster is better, all these other things. And because we have a deep need to belong, all the way back to us talking about wanting to belong on a primal level, we don't want not to be successful. We want to get the likes. We want to get the ratings. We want to get the money. We want to get the things that society deems us as successful. So the only way we can move at this pace that our biology, this is why we're burning out, but our biology says we need to pay attention to and we're divided. Now, we could do a lot more if we did it together. In synergy and collaboration, we could meet a lot of this. And that's why I think the people who are really going to do well now are the ones who develop their own self-trust, the teams that build company-wide trust, because that'll lead to collaboration, innovation, synergy,
Absolutely.
and ability and agility. So when you have self-trust, you're going to take risks. You're going to speak up. You're going to change course. You're going to be able to handle this. And I think what AI is going to do is speed up the world to a place that it's going to, first of all, let go of anything that no longer serves us, which is going to create its own shift and chaos. But just like in the pandemic, just like in many other ways in the world, it's going to be a wake-up call to many people in many industries. I think as coaches, there is something so important about human-to-human connection. Really feeling, it's the difference between being on Zoom and being in person with people.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I think some basic skills. Yes, I think AI is going to take anything that's repeatable and rote, and that's going to be gone. I think what's going to matter now is communication skills, self-trust, self-awareness, innovation, human connection, human skills. But I think not the basic ones. I think the more complex ones, the ones that require, real human contact, connection, empathy, all of that. I think those will be needed. And so I think we're actually quite well positioned for the future of the world.
I think that sounds great. I just looked at the time. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, I thought we were talking for 20 minutes. I, I feel hopeful. I feel like we will figure it out,
Well, this is about how much pain do we need before we're willing to change and get out of our comfort zone into the learning zone.
Well, and that's what's the irony. We are in such discomfort. We like, if we're confusing what we are in now with comfort, wow. Because I think everything is so just everything. It feels burnt out. It feels toxic. But it also feels like people, and I could say a lot of things about the younger generation, but I feel like they feel it poignantly and they're demanding, if you will, to be healed. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. And
so
we missed it in families and in education. So now businesses and the work environment for Gen Z, they're going to be 30% of the workforce by 2030. Mm-hmm. Our job now in companies is to help them get the mental, emotional resilience that they've gotten, their communication skills, all of this. These are the companies that invest in this are now going to be the ones that lead.
And it's so interesting you say that, because and that's why there is such a struggle now in the companies with the employees, because in the past the families would teach those, but work takes on, in a way, a much greater role for fulfilling people. It's actually quite interesting, and yet the people do not want. The younger people today are not willing to do what our parents did, and I don't blame them. So I have one more question for you before I want you to unabashedly promote yourself and your books and how people can learn about you. So here's my last question. Imagine, and Einstein used to say that imagination is a preview to the future. He's not exactly a woo-woo guy, right? And he said that he used to imagine riding beside a light beam, and that's how he discovered the theory of relativity. It's actually, I was like, wow, when I read that. So I'd like you to imagine this huge box in front of you, and inside that box is everything you've ever lost in your life. Everything. What's the first thing you would reach into the box for to retrieve, and why?
I wouldn't want to put my uncle in a box, but if he was there, it would be him. He was the one when I was young in that predicament with my family and being bullied. He was the person who saw me. He was the person who protected me. And I was supposed to fly with him on a plane. He was a pilot. So him and 10 guys went in on a 4-seater plane. So the first
professional pilot, that's what he did for work?
Like, I don't know if it's a professional pilot. I just know that he knew how to fly. And so him and 10 buddies bought a 4-seater plane. And November 2nd, 1980, I was supposed to go flying with him that day, but one of his buddies wanted to go instead with their 2 kids. And so there's 4 seat belts. So he said, Neha, we'll do it another time. And a hot air balloon drifted on the runway that day, and he had to divert, and another plane landed on him. And so he died that day. And I remember,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I remember just knowing at the time, because I had already had abandonment and loss as part of my world. I think I unconsciously made the decision that to fully love someone would be too painful, whether it's my grandparents or my uncle or whatever it is. And I think that's a lot of the reason that in my life, I have really developed really deep friendships and deep connections. But it's taken me until my 50s to actually let go and love, and to actually trust again that, I can love and I won't be shattered by it. And so I would welcome Mukumama back up. I'd hold my hand down and bring him back up. But what I'd say to you is, the people we lose in our lives, my belief is that we don't really lose them, that they are now in us.
Thank you so much I'm ready to cry too. Thank you so much for sharing that and for being vulnerable and trusting me with that.
You
I, uh,
bet.
I, I, I feel that, and I agree with you. I feel the people we lose that we love, we only lose the physical body, but we carry them in our soul or our heart or whatever
Yeah.
you want to
No, they
call
move from, so we move from seeing them at certain times in our life to them being in our
it.
hearts.
Feeling, yeah,
Yeah.
which is great. Okay, so tell everybody. I know they're going to want to get your books, learn more about you, your wisdom, and what I'm really touched by is your grace. So please share with the audience how they can learn more about you. Unabashedly go for it. Take out that
Well,
testosterone and go for it.
well, what I'd say is if they want a live experience, I just launched a book powered by me from burned out to fully charged. I'll be at the Omega Institute June 9th to the 14th
Mhm.
for 1 week live where we'll do a deep dive together. That'll be probably my intimate, experience, and that's a low cost, fun way to be together. My website is intuitiveintelligenceinc.com. And if you do forward intuitiveintelligenceinc.com/burnout hyphen RX, you'll get that burnout assessment with a 6 video series to me walking you through how you can figure out where you are from burned out to fully charged at work and in life. And then I'd say the two other important things to know. Well, I'll be at the World Happiness Summit in London, which is fun. That's coming up. And then two books that I've written. One is Talk RX, from 5 steps to honest conversations that create connection, health, and happiness. And that's about if you're struggling with something, a medical ailment that you've gotten a clear bill of health from your doctors. So they're saying everything's fine, but you don't feel fine. Talk RX will give you how your physical health is connected to your mental, emotional, social, spiritual health, and it will teach you how to lean into healthy conflict. So that's on Audible. That's an audiobook that's read by me. I got the rights back to the paperback, so that's not as available anymore. And then the second book is powered by me, from burned out to fully charged at work and in life. But you can find it all at intuitiveintelligenceinc.com or nehasangwan.com.
Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and all your experience. You are at the intersection of what the world needs more of. That's for sure.
Mm.
So thank you so much for being you, and thank you for being such a gracious, wonderful guest today.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be with you.